So this is now the last part of the series HDRI and linear light workflow, and if you have noticed that I go sometimes a little bit away from the main path, it's only to give you the best base to get here now without any bruises through that longer discussion. I start in this episode to give you the really short, simplified introduction to the whole scene. And normally when you see me in a class or presentation talk about this, then I draw normally a line. The top area is for the humans with the human perception, and the lower part is for the machines, for example here the camera. And the line is of course where I separate them. And then we have here, the line is also a timeline. We have here the input where we get our material in, and we have here an output when it goes finally to the theaters, to the TV, to whatever, wherever we use this stuff. I don't care here at the moment a lot about the output. That's a complete different story. I care about everything here, what happens when we get stuff in. And when we have from the camera raw or a clean JPEG, and clean JPEG means here no distortion in terms of curves inside the camera. So raw is my favorite here, of course, turn into an HDRI. And when this happens in the best way, as I have explained this earlier before, then we get something that looks like a linear light file. This is the target here, and we know when we have here stops and here numerical values, we get a logarithmic curve, for example. Not what I want to do here, because we have to talk about gamma as well, and then the confusion starts. Logarithmic curves and gamma and all of that, I have seen it mixed together happily to be rendered out finally to a confusion in explanation about all of that. So this here is one input option. It could be everything. However, when this is the part that we get in linear light, the computer needs, of course, and in this case Cinema 4D, needs linear light workflow formats. We can have, of course, JPEGs in it and everything else, but the gamma curve shouldn't be baked in. The gamma curve should be described in the color profile. And as long as that happens, Cinema 4D can say, okay, we have here an sRGB profile. The real linear light work could be then by converting this back to something that we can use. Okay, and then when we have done our work, we want to give this out again as linear. And then we have maybe a conversation, but this is already very close here to the output file. During the whole workflow, we have to check, for example, what comes out of the camera. And to do that, we need maybe just a screen. The screen is a CRT. At least from the history, we have now LEDs and everything else in it, but the original was the cathode ray tube, and it had, by default, based on its construction, a gamma curve in it. And you might read more than often that this curve was all that cared about the whole workflow that we had so far in history, the workflow before linear light. That is not really true, because it was a happy accident, practically, that this curve was pretty much like we have our vision. The human perception has pretty much something like that in characteristic. And then we had also to deal with the gamma curve for our images, where we got, maybe from linear sensors, lots of data in the highlights but nearly no data in the darks. And that would have given us a lot of bad images. And based on that, we can flip the gamma curve to the other side. To get rid of this gamma curve characteristic, to balance this, we had another advantage. So the formats to store it, the CRT and the human perception, worked happily together. And that is why it works even today with newer screens. And this is based on a lot of facts that I got, and of course from sources that I trust. Based on the information in this first-class book and findings all over the place, I go with this idea. Whatever we have, we can say we have in the lower part the linear workflow part, in the upper part we have the gamma part, so to say, and this is pretty much what we need. And the output, of course, goes maybe in linear, but is then translated more than often into any kind of gamma curve. And gamma by itself is nothing very specific, and it is not even really specified for TV stations. It varies based on the viewing conditions. So something that is mostly watched in darker rooms has a higher gamma value than stuff that is watched in brighter rooms. So there is a variance in the curves and so on. So there's always something to consider. Anyway, this is all over the line. It is only when we want to see what we get from the outside, like from a camera, and then we want to see what Cinema 4D does to the picture. Also, there's a conversation on this point. It doesn't change anything here, it's only output. There's no way back then finally. It just doesn't happen. And then we have here maybe on the way also compositing, maybe just Nuke, for example, which is a natural linear light tool, and that needs of course also this translation. Sometimes we have even an LUT in it, and lookup table for color correction and everything else, and of course color profiles all over the place, always to get from this area, from the lower area, everything into the human perception. And that is pretty much all. And now I delete this and I make this pretty clear. We have the lower part, just simple, linear light, and on the top part we have our gamma stuff. So this is for the eye, this is for the machine, so to say. And then we go here time-wise from the start to the end, to the output. That's the whole idea. And when you keep this in mind always, then nothing can go wrong. And in the next part I want to go through each and every little thing here that I can think of, and maybe I missed something, but how we can screw up that whole thing just by using maybe here or there something different, because this area here is large. Thanks for listening. Have fun with it. Bye bye.